And good evening, and welcome once again to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And, I'm sorry about last night. Just wasn't the time for it, but I'm rip-roaring and ready to go and get into another volume of new comics, bitches! And yes, your eyes do not lie. I have new glasses. Anyway, yeah, it was just, I was feeling sick, I was feeling shitty, I was feeling pissy. It was just, there was no way that I could get out everything that I wanted to talk about last night. Because there are so many books to go over this week, including some really important ones. So, we meaning me, I'm basically going to be dividing this particular week up into two segments, because I know that some of you love the epic reviews, but this one I kind of wanted specifically to do in two parts. Now, tonight, you will get definitely a glimpse of some of my picks of the week, but tonight will be revolving around the indie titles. And then tomorrow, we will have the mainstream, your Marvel and your DC. But aside from that, tonight we're dedicating to Image, Valiant, Image, sort of thing, Dark Horse. So yeah, mostly Image. So let's get down to it. So tonight we're going to start with Valiant, and we are going to start with Archer and Armstrong, number 7. So, now, I know that a lot of you aren't reading the Valiant titles, and that's okay, because from what I want to say about them, it's very, I think that these are all things that will probably end up on a lot of I'm hoping, a lot of your trade pickup lists, because there's some really, really solid stuff, as I've said any number of times that Valiant has been putting out. And when the trades finally do come out, if they haven't started already, I have no idea. We're kind of, or we're getting there. Like, I'm sure that Exo-Man of War and Harbinger are going to be probably the first two trades that come out, probably followed closely by Archer and Armstrong and BLOODSHOT, and then eventually Shadow Man. Now, so let's talk about Archer and Armstrong, number 7. So basically, we have Obi and Aram, or Armstrong, whatever you want to call him, and Gilead, and the new Geomancer K are basically they see that there's basically much more to the threat that's being presented by the Null than they had possibly anticipated. Basically, the issue itself opens in kind of ancient Greece, and Gilead is he's working with Archimedes, and one of the great kind of mathematical minds of that era, and there are opposing armies basically led by the Null that are laying siege and even interrupting, a big kind of feast of Athena celebration that they're having. And Gilead is trying to make sure that that Archimedes stays out of the Null's reach, but unfortunately he's too late. Archimedes is already dying, and there's a concentration very specifically on the number 0. And that's a lot about what this particular issue is about. It's about numbers. And about mathematics, and about kind of the creation of the number 0. And there's a lot of kind of historical context that this is put into. Essentially that the number 0 is kind of the all-encompassing, the thing that the null clings to. That is their, that's kind of their, the word is escaping my head, of course, because I didn't, actually write all of this stuff down. I just have little notes to go off of. But it's kind of, it's their bag, baby. I mean, it's, the number 0, as they talk about even in this issue, if you divide any number by 0, you get 0, and if you divide 1 by 0, it's, you get an infinite number that goes on and never ever ends. So and that's part of the null. The null essentially is nothingness. I mean, it's kind of a worship of it's a dedication to nothingness. It's a dedication to the destruction of the world. Now, admittedly, Gilead is a little bit less pissed off at his brother and at not quite so much at Obi, but very pissed off with not quite so pissed off with Aram as he was, because there is a new geomancer. So this kind of takes the heat off of Aram and Obi for the time being. Although Gilead, of course, understanding that Obi did, that Obadiah was raised to be an assassin, to kill Aram, that his alliances are in question, at least as far as Gilead is concerned. But definitely not, he definitely proved himself, of course, time and time again, that he is an ally of their cause. And even get to kind of where the null has been, and there's some good fight sequences here, and then you have some really nice character exchanges and moments here, and we have kind of the beginning of Kay's understanding of her abilities, and we see the little monkey, the little talking monkey that is kind of helping to show her the way. They find this great big vault that doesn't seem to have a key or any discernible way of opening it, but then Kay starts using her powers, and she starts seeing almost, and I hate to use kind of this comparison, but kind of almost a matrix code of certain things, and then just sees in all of that, sees the way to get inside. And of course, this is within the Nulls, one of their buildings. And it leads to this map, or this kind of raised relief, scale miniature of Greenland. And what it looks like is that the corporation that is run by the villain Zorn here, and I'll get more on that in a minute. It seems to be that he's looking to put a huge golf course in Greenland, and again, this is going against the whole, adding to the whole kind of global warming thing, the climate change scenario that was being debated in the previous issue by Kay. She's the mouthpiece for the kind of anti-global warming is just a myth type of thing. That was her whole thing, and now that she's discovered the secrets of Zorn and and being part of the 1%ers and everything like that, that he is he's major villain. So they this golf course actually becomes a puzzle that reveals itself, and they answer the question, and then it creates again another kind of almost, but it's kind of this code around this whole room, but it is visible to everyone. And this is kind of, it's more leading to what they have discovered. And what Gilad sees is that also in his travels, he was working with Alan Turing, who historically in the in the 1940s, he's the guy, he's the British operative or British government employee, mathematician, that broke the code of the Enigma machine. Of course, famously used by the Nazis in World War II to send their encrypted communications. He's the one that was responsible for breaking that code, and he was actually protecting him for a while, and from not only the null, but also from SMERSH agents. So, and then we have just this kind of crazed ending where we see Zorn is kind of, he is like in full-on villain mode. There's no pretense to him at all. He's kind of a mix of Darth Vader and, like this super-duper Bond villain. And that's kind of where we leave off with this big kind of question mark as to what exactly is coming next. But we do know that, our four kind of intrepid heroes are, at least for the time being, they are, they have one goal, which is to save the world from the null world equation, which is what Gilad sees in this code that's on this wall in this room. Fred Van Lente, he is, this book is to Valiant as to what I believe Wolverine and the X-Men is to Marvel. It's kind of the fun book, because it doesn't skimp on humor. It goes for a lot of little tidbits here and there. We do get, again, there's more mystery as Kay, the new Geomancer, looks at Obadiah, and because he remembers something that one of the green swastika monks said to him back in the previous arc, that there's much more to him than he seems, which is why he was the one who was eventually able to kind of save the world there. And when he he asks her to look at him with kind of her new eyes, and she sees just all, over his body, just all the symbols for infinity, or just, encompass his body. But it has something to, but she is relatively certain that it has something to do. She asks him, "Are you familiar with the phrase rising spirit?" So now here comes PRS, obviously from both Harbinger and Bloodshot, now into this book. So again, we're having a very complete universe here with a very specific kind of group of villains that are there. So it's just, that part was extra cool there. But one of the things that I did really enjoy about this book is that you have these moments in London when Gilad is trying to protect, he's trying to protect Turing from SMERSH, which is, for those of us who are Bond aficionados, I can't claim to be a Bond aficionado, but I know a lot about them. Of course, I've read some of the books, and I've seen pretty much all the films. But I wouldn't claim to be like a know-it-all. But SMERSH, of course, is a clumsy acronym for Smert Spionum, which means literally death to spies in Russian. And of course, this was one of the agencies that James Bond was fighting. Even going as far back as the book of Casino Royale. But again, that's And then we have this character Zorn. Now, of course, again, for more Bond fans, you know, you had Christopher Walken in A View to a Kill played a character, you know, a leader of industry who wanted to do, I can't remember exactly what his plans were in View to a Kill because I hated that movie and I never saw it more than once. But he was the main villain and his name was Zorn. So it was like, you know, we have, I think, you know, and his villain is very much, like I said, it's kind of like this full-on Bond villain type of thing. And it's just, I think that this book is kind of, you know, that Fred Van Lente is kind of, he's inserting kind of these little kind of tiny Easter eggs into this book to kind of give us more of a feel of that, yeah, we're having a little bit of fun here with this book by giving it some some kind of self-referential material, but also just, you know, I mean, the book itself is plain fun. There's good action here. There's some really nice character moments, and you know, it's just a really well done book. And you know, Emanuele Lupacchino, who's the artist here, again doing some terrific work. So this book, absolutely a 4.5 out of 5. It's tremendously fun. It's very entertaining, and it's just a really smart and well done book. And you know, and I'm glad it's out there because it does. You know, it's one of those comics that I always look forward to reading because more or less it's always fun. It's always entertaining. It's always, you know, a little bit off the wall. Which is good for especially, you know, a comic like this. Now, continuing with Valiant, on to Bloodshot, number 8. Now, basically, we have kind of now the last issue, issue 7, was kind of more of a one-off, and it seemed to be very kind of all over the place, and it was about, you know, missions that missions that Bloodshot used to do, where he was kind of capturing young psyops and bringing them back to PRS. And here now, as we saw with the ending of issue 6, we're now, you know, we kind of skip over that to this issue here, in which finally that last issue makes a little bit more sense. It's not that I still don't particularly care for that issue, but it does make a little bit more sense as to why they decided to put that kind of one-off in. Because, you know, here he is facing off against a lot of the kids that he's put, you know, kind of behind bars, if you will, at Project Rising Spirit. And then you have moments of Melissa, aka Pulse, and Kara, the nurse, kind of having their own issues to have to deal with. One of them, you know, Melissa kind of meeting Gamma again for the first time in quite some time, and being totally afraid of her. And you know, it's one thing, Gamma just kind of almost feeding on that fear, like, gives her some sort of extra power. And Gamma is just, she is a huge, frightening, you know, she's like Nurse Ratched on Venom. It's like she's like the Bane version of Nurse Ratched. And basically we have Bloodshot. He is out of communication with Koretich, unfortunately, but he finally is, you know, and these kids, they're all scared shitless of him, and he doesn't know why. He doesn't understand. And of course, you know, you have this guy who's being held, kind of the guy who's running this point team that's been assigned to take out Bloodshot, and and Kara's kind of got, his, kind of this tube of like plasma or something like that that sustains his life, that like feeds directly into his carotid artery, and she's ready to yank it out if she doesn't call off his dogs, so to speak. But he's saying that, look, if you let these kids go, these are not 25 little kids. These are 25 little atom bombs that are about, and they're released, the world will end. It's just as simple as that. And we see, what some of these kids can do. There is, a lot of sequences with these kids kind of helping each other out, relating to one another. And unfortunately, that's where the the issue does start to slip off a bit is because we're not sure exactly what these kids are and what their meaning is. Sort of, there's one kid in particular who's being held in this kind of, tank, and, filled with, some kind of liquid, whatever, and, it's like, what significance does this kid have? We don't really spend too much time with this because Duane Straczynski really needs to hit these action beats that he's working on. And of course, we do get some really terrific action beats in this book. We have pretty bitchin' beheading. So I mean, basically the last two of the kind of point team are erased. They are done. But, we still have Bloodshot, and of course, he has to face off against Gamma. And Gamma's seems to be pretty fucking strong. This is, again, the mystery of who these children is it's very thick, and again takes up a decent chunk of the book. The times where the book does work best, though, is actually in the moment when Melissa meets Gamma again for the first time. Because you can really, I mean, Straczynski and Kari Evans really lay on the it's not Kari Evans, it's Garcia. I think Jorge Garcia or something to that effect. No, Jorge Garcia is the guy from is Hurley from Lost. Anyway, it's beside the point. But they really do a brilliant job of showing exactly what this person means to each other. Just through the facial expressions, through the dialogue, through, I mean, just this, just moments of, terrific menace that Gamma brings to the table, especially when faced with one of her former charges. It's a really effective and very tense moment, and I wish there had been more moments like that in this book to really fill it out. But, we still do get some really nice action beats. The character's a little bit, because Bloodshot is kind of a blank slate as it is, we don't really get a feeling of his character other than he wants to know who he is, and he is on a mission to take down PRS. Because they seem to have stolen his life from him, and he wants to know who he is, where he came from. And so, I mean, there is a personal stake here, but again, his character is that of kind of the valiant guy. He's a good guy, but he's just, unfortunately, he's, other than, his ability to really kill people, we don't really get where he's coming from. But Melissa and Kara, we do get why they've gone along for this ride here. So this is a 4 out of 5. Like I said, I mean, it's a very well done book. It just, I think it heads off into some directions and just kind of it just kind of drops them out. And just some of these moments, they kind of take the sense of urgency out of the book, even when it's trying to add more urgency. So, yeah, that happens sometimes. And that's cool. I'm okay with that. Bedlam, number 4. I'm really enjoying this book. Basically, we have, but not in a kind of giddy sense all the time. I mean, it's weird because this is a book that is kind of a mix of, that Nick Spencer has really put together with kind of this very fluid mix of kind of crazed humor and some really fucking twisted shit. I mean, that's the best thing that I can. I mean, that's the best way I can sum up this book, is that it's funny at times, and it's just incredibly twisted and disturbing at other times. But it balances out. basically, Fillmore Press takes a lot of this book off because he's been absconded to the roof of the police station to meet with the First. And Detective Acevedo, she is, of course, trying to put together a case for Press being the killer. Of course, we already know that it's not, that it's this, this incredibly psychotic, man with, metal wings, and, he tucks his penis between his legs, and, I mean, it's just, he wears fishnet stuff. I mean, it's just, this kind of, almost Lynchian angel of death. So basically, while the First, as we kind of understand, is kind of beating the crap out of Press up on the roof to try and get him to talk and to spill his guts and to confess that yes, he is indeed the murderer. Basically, the book kicks off with the death of a priest in his bathtub, and he's obviously been murdered, and there's a lot of evidence too that wasn't just suicide or something like that. It was kind of a martyr's death, and I'll get to more of that in a minute. But a nun comes in to talk about is kind of the only real witness. She found the body, so of course she's come in, and they find out that the young man that was killed in the second issue, kind of the first victim that we've seen of this kind of angel of death, whatever this guy is presenting himself to be. He is found out, they discover his identity, that he used to be an altar boy at this church called St. Thomas. And St. Thomas was, of course, embroiled in a pretty horrific sexual abuse scandal many years prior. And it's possible maybe that this priest might have known about it or something to that effect, because the nun kind of hushes up when she starts talking about certain things, when Acevedo starts questioning her about certain things, about, if the father had any enemies or anything to that effect. And that, of course, is, it's kind of out of that, with the death of the altar boy, the death of the priest, that she starts to put some pieces together, and it's that the assailant is more than likely not Fillmore Press, but rather one of the victims of this abuse case. So, of course, she rushes up to the roof to stop the First from beating the crap out of Press, and basically saying, look, it's not him. He's not our guy. Somebody else is. And the First is just a little bit kind of put off by this. Like, you've had me beating and you've had me beating this guy and intimidating him for the last 10 minutes or so. You couldn't have done some more due diligence. And Press he's like if your apology is accepted, all that kind of stuff, just being himself. And, he starts hearing about this latest murder, and again, he's like, oh, well, that makes sense. And she's like, well, how does that make sense? And he starts to explain how all of these deaths are kind of martyrs' deaths. And she says, why didn't you say anything about that before? And then Press just says, well, hey, look, if I come to you with all this, and hey, if I start talking about religion, you're going to start thinking I'm an even bigger wacko than you already do think I am. So it was just, moments like that that do kind of keep, kind of the wit of this alive, but then we switch gears immediately as there is a a rather horrific closing moment to this issue, in which our angel character has walked into the St. Thomas Hospital and with 2 assault rifles and is shooting up the place. So, you know, it's no longer seems to be this kind of angel of mercy that this guy is, you know, him killing people who have had near-death experiences. It seems to be more of maybe even a grudge against, you know, against the church, against the hospital it helped found. You know, everything about it screams that this is a person that's out for very personal revenge on a very large target. And, you know, one of the things that's so great about this book is the art by Riley Rossmo. It's just, and also, especially in this issue, the coloring by Jean-Paul Zucca. It makes the characters and the city almost seem like it's some overgrown, overpopulated asylum of sorts. Like, everybody in it is just subject, it's either a perpetrator or a victim of madness. Of just, you know, of evil. I mean, it's very sooty, it's very grimy, it's very, you know, Rossmo's lines are very sketchy, and it's just, it's so, the art is so well done for a book like this. Of course, I mean, if you transpose this to, you know, one of the big superhero titles, it would be an abysmal failure, but for this type of title, we're right on target for where this needs to be. So, I mean, this is very much a 4.5 out of 5. Another terrific issue for Bedlam. I just wish that I'd seen more of press. I would have liked to have had the issue be almost more of the rooftop sequence, what's going on the roof between the First and Fillmore Press, because obviously, you know, the First doesn't know who he is, and one would only assume that Fillmore Press knows that maybe the First is, you know, because the whole kind of Matter Red thing is, you know, gone, but definitely not forgotten. So, just terrific, terrific issue. Buffy Season 9, number 18. So basically we have Severin, the Siphon, is targeting Illyria. Now, I did not read the last issue of this book, so I forgot that Illyria was going to be jumping on board. But that he's trying to basically siphon Illyria's power from her so that he can bend time and space to his will, so that he can go back in time and save his girlfriend from becoming a zombire. That is Severin's whole mission here. But he, you know, kind of specifically needs the power of Illyria to do that, because she does have the ability to warp space and time. But in the midst of all this, we have, unfortunately, Dawn, which I'm assuming this is from the previous issue, is suffering from some unknown ailment, which no doctor can quantify or can properly diagnose. And Xander, of course, is there at her side and is looking to, you know, to anyone for answers. Now, in the meantime, we've got Billy and his friend Anne are kind of outnumbered by a pack of zompires, and then you also have then we have Andrew kind of coming to Xander and Dawn's rescue by seeing, you know, if this possibly has any mystical meaning or anything to that effect, and of course he's not able to determine that either. So they take her out, Star Trek IV Voyage Home style, and the idea is that maybe that they're going to put Dawn's brain, mental, whatever, mental patterns into a Dawn bot that Andrew can construct a Dawn bot for her to save her. And we get a meeting with, the Council, which is a lot of the demons that we've come across in the past, and we have all this fighting going on. It's just... Basically, what I can really say here is that aside from the moments with Xander, and aside from the moments once Andrew arrives, this book feels totally disconnected from the Whedonverse. It just feels, I don't know, again, what happened in the previous issue, but it doesn't matter. I don't know if they somehow revealed that somehow that maybe the Council fixed Illyria's powers as far as her ability to to bend time and space, because those of you who watched Angel, which is, and I know this is going to be weird for some of you to hear if I haven't said it already, but is actually my favorite of the Whedonverse shows. Despite the shirt that I'm wearing, I do love Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along blog. I do love Buffy, but Buffy did have one really off season, which was season 6. And Angel, of course, Firefly, it only ran for one season, then got a movie, and I love Firefly, don't get me wrong. Dollhouse was not hit or miss, it was just, it never hit the levels that Buffy and Angel and Firefly hit. So Angel was my favorite of the shows because it was the most consistent. It had the most, I think, by and large, the most interesting characters. It had much more of a go-for-broke mentality than even Buffy did, because, Buffy dies in Season 5. Angel dies in Season 2, but is then brought back. Angel had, people who would live and die, as far as, the main characters were concerned. Albeit that was mostly in Season 5 that these characters kind of went through this, but even in Season 4, with Cordelia, it was just, to me, it was much more of an even show. Every season was always felt right on the money, which is one of the reasons that I loved Angel above all else. And just Angel had such an incredibly epic sensibility to it, despite it being kind of a smaller scale show, surprisingly enough. But, especially once it got into Season 5, it was just, I think because they knew it was the final season, they're like, fuck it, we're just pulling out all the stops. Because, none of the core group in Buffy dies at the end of Season 7. Which is one of the problems that I actually had, because I would have liked to have seen what I wouldn't have liked to have seen, but I think it would have been more fitting, because Anya dies. But, no Willow, no Giles, no Xander, no Buffy, no Dawn. Spike dies, but of course, once that series ended, and then of course Season 5 of Angel came after that, Spike is immediately brought back. Because you need Spike. Spike is just that awesome of a character. But anyway, but in Angel, in the episode, I can't remember the title of it, but in Season 5, Illyria is actually stripped of her ability to bend time and space, because her energy is unstable. It is building to kind of a critical mass that can destroy all of Los Angeles. So basically all that she has really left is her incredible strength and her kind of ability to turn back into Fred. which of course was heartbreaking during that show. So I mean, this is my real problem with is that Andrew Chambliss, I just don't think has what it takes to build properly on the great mythology that was left when these shows ended. Now, I mean, in Buffy season 8, I mean, you had, you know, Whedon himself writing, you had Brian K. Vaughan, you had, you know, Drew Goddard, and I think I've gone over all of this before, but, you know, I mean, Andrew Chambliss just doesn't seem to fit, his voices don't seem to fit the characters that well. He just doesn't seem to have a real handle on it. And that's why this book has been, for so long, kind of teetering on the edge, and this one just dropped me off of it. Even, you know, Georges Janté's art in this issue seems to be very off. So it was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. Until they start with a new, until they get a new writer in there, I'm not picking it up again. Because this, you know, I'm going to stick with Angel and Faith, because that is a consistently really good and sometimes great book. But this book is just, it's just lost me. It's come to a point where I don't care that much about the characters anymore. I won't say that they've outlived any of their usefulness. I would have liked, you know, if this issue had been a lot more about, like, Xander and Andrew, I probably would be, okay, you know what, this is good. But every, you know, even, there's no subtlety to Chambliss's humor. You know, some of the self-referential stuff that he does, it's just, it's so kind of blatant and in your face with the, you know, with the humor. It's like, you know, blue's not a good color for you, and, you know, just all that kind of stuff. It's like, really? You know, I mean, that just, it doesn't, it lacks the Whedon speak that is so important to the Whedon verse. So this book, you know, at best was a 2 out of 5. At best. I mean, that's a very, very soft 2. It's more of a, like a 1.5 out of 5. But this is basically, this was the sign, it's time to drop this book. So that's what I'm doing. I'm dropping it. Snapshot number 1. It's funny because I didn't even really hear about this book until this week. And I thought, okay, well, it's Andy Diggle and it's Jock. So it's Jock doing art on a book again in its entirety. And it's Andy Diggle, you know, it's the team that brought us The Losers, right? So, I mean, there's got to be some good stuff here. Now, admittedly, I haven't read all of The Losers, but I did read a pretty good amount of it, and it's a really good book. But this was after this was after Snyder working with Jock on Detective Comics pre-New 52, so I'm just really, I was just excited to see him doing interiors again. Now, basically, this book about this young man named Jake, who lives in San Francisco, and he is riding his bike to work, and he comes across a smartphone that is just laying there in the grass. You know, so, hey, cool, finders keepers. And so he takes it to his job, and his job is he's basically a clerk at a comic book store. And you know, his buddy Steve is there, and his buddy Steve has this kind of, you know, henpeckish girlfriend who's, you know, very into all of the movements and the marches and everything like that. And he just kind of wants to stay out of all of that, or his, I don't know if it's his girlfriend or, excuse me, his wife. That wasn't really made quite clear. Excuse me. And you know, and there's some geeky comic speak in here. And then, he shows Steve the phone. He's like, look what I found. And then he starts kind of going through it, and he's looking at some stuff, and just looking at like the contact list and so on and so forth. And doesn't really have any plans to give it back to anybody or whatever. But then he also starts going through the slideshow on the phone, and boom, what do we see? We see some pictures of a corpse. And then, uh-oh. So he does, so then the phone rings, and, he answers it and this is Jake Dobson. And this person claims to be, a police officer that's working on this investigation that involves this phone. It says, if do you have a safe somewhere, just put it in the safe and just keep it there until I arrive. I'll be there shortly. This person does arrive, said, I'm, the homicide detective that you talked to on the phone. Can you bring me out the phone? And of course, while he's coming to bring out the phone, he sees that this guy is pulling out a gun, screwing a silencer into the barrel, and Jake decides to book it. So we know that we're in for, there's definitely some kind of conspiratorial murder mystery going on here. Who is this guy that wants to kill him? Who is the guy in the picture? And he goes then to the police, and even as he enters the police station, you see these people that are kind of waiting outside in a car or like a van or something to that effect. And they're like, just wait for him to tell his story, and then we'll go in and we'll drop the bomb. And he's telling the story, and he's showing the pictures to the police officers and everything like that. And then this guy comes in and, says that, I'm sorry, it's, I'm sorry that, this has kind of gone to all this trouble, but this whole thing is actually, this is all just, it was a recreation. We were doing, me and my friends were doing like one of those murder mystery parties, and this is just, this is like one of those clues that we want to leave behind. And then, of course, Jake is all like, well, what about the guy that tried to kill me in the store? And then, of course, this guy is like, well, that was just one of our, players. I think he was taking his role as a detective a little bit too seriously. So, sure, nobody means you any harm. And, just if I can get the phone back. And of course, the officer, after asking for some identification in regards to the phone, ends up giving him back the phone. And of course, the police officer's like, hey, get out of here. We've got real work to do, kid. So then Jake goes back to Steve, says, hey, man, you're not going to believe what's been going on here today. And, of course, they're like, hey, man, this dude was fucking with you, so let's go fuck with him. And, of course, this is all Steve's idea, so that he can get out of making all these placards and signs, all those protest signs, with his girlfriend/wife, whatever. And they go and they find where this guy lives. And, they actually go into the apartment, and of course Jake's like, no, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea. Now Steve's like, it's a great idea, it's a fine idea, it'll be fun. We're just going to fuck with him like he fucked with you. And of course, then comes the badness. Is that, no, of course, nobody was just fucking with young Jake. And they prove that in a very, very violent way. And a very final way for Steve. But of course, it's the last page of the book that is perhaps the greatest mystery of all, which is where the man who just killed Steve asks a favor of young Jake. So I don't want to spoil it completely. I know that was kind of a spoilerish review for a lot of people that probably haven't read this. So, sorry. Sorry. But, since this book came out last week, if you haven't read it yet, too bad for you. No, I don't really think that way. I am sorry if that went maybe a little bit too far. But anyway, I mean, this is just the book. The book is entirely in black and white, no color, which makes kind of the starkness of it, the good kind of grim and gritty crime element to this story even more, not obvious, but just certainly more on the table there. And Jock's art, as always, looks terrific. It's kind of, everything is just slightly askew. Angles, faces, eyes. Nothing is perfect. Nothing looks perfect. And that's one of the things I love about Jock's work, is that it's very impressionistic in its style. And Andy Diggle writes a really solid story, really good, entertaining first issue here. The only real problem that I have is with our main protagonist, Jake, is that I just wish that, because, we've had stories, obviously, like Kick-Ass, where we get the point of view of the comic book nerd who eventually becomes a kind of pseudo comic book hero. And we all know how much I loved the first part of Kick-Ass and how much I hated the second volume of Kick-Ass. I just think that this book could benefit greater from someone who wasn't quite so much, it's like, oh, well, this is, we're reading about us. We're reading about the comic book geek, because we are the comic book geek. Anybody who's reading this, pretty much, they're already pretty much into the whole comic book thing, because they're not going to just, no non-comic reader is just going to go in and pick up, an issue of Snapshot, and think, oh, hey, it's Andy Diggle and Jock, two people I've never heard of, and a book that isn't one of the major titles from any of the companies. And, so this book is kind of tailor-made for the comic book reader, and that I think is one of its problems. Because I don't like books that are so much made, for the, to give so much fan service that they even make a character that is a fan. That just, it reeks. I shouldn't say it reeks. It's a little hacky for my taste, but still, I mean, it's still a really well written and really well constructed book. There's some good moments, good character intros here, and I mean, all in all, it seems like it'll be a really intriguing ride more than anything else. So I give this a 4 out of 5. I mean, it's always worth it to see Jock's work and to see what Andy Diggle and Jock are going to cook up here. So, I think that this book will have some legs to it for a little while, however long the series is going to go on for. I have no idea whether or not it's going to be I'm certain it's not going to be an ongoing series. I just don't know how many issues there are in it. So 4 out of 5 for Snapshot number 1. Now on to our indie books of the week, of which there are 3. And I would almost save these for tomorrow night when I do my full book, the rest of the books, and really get down to the nitty-gritty of the books of the week. But there are 5 really great books that came out this week, and 3 of them are indie. So as far as, I guess, the indie awards for this week's issues are as follows. So the Manhattan Project's number 9. So basically what we have here is that the threat that was caused by the FDRAI, kind of under the auspices of President Truman, have been solved. That, the cabal of, Groves and Feynman and Einstein and Oppenheimer and Yuri Gagarin and so on and so forth, have they've defeated the threats to eliminate them all, and they've fixed the FDRAI, and basically they are all in the mood for vengeance. They are ready to kind of not take back what's theirs, but just to take away everything that belongs to the cabal that's behind all of this. Starting first of all with the FDRAI, which of course we have our resident space dog. We have sorry, this is one of those books. It did make me laugh out loud in a number of places. But it got the dog peeing on the connection that the power that's the power connection for the FDRAI, so shuts him down, and basically so our resident scientists, they have been filled in on the members of Truman's cabal, which are they all represent kind of different portions of kind of the heads of this or that or the other thing. I mean, first we have this kind of luchador that is a he's kind of representing the kind of the banking industry. We have a just this robed character that is that represents religion. We have this huge, fat, disgusting, gluttonous swine that represents industry. And then we have this strange, almost like Egyptian mummy kind of character that represents magic. And they all take these guys to task. You have Einstein and Feynman taking out the luchador in stunning fashion, and then you have Groves kind of taking back his office from both the religion guy called the Robe and the huge fat gluttonous guy who has quote unquote marked his territory all over Groves's office. And yes, that is what they mean. And flamethrower in, and those guys are just gone. And then we have Gagarin and kind of the space dog up against the Egyptian and his cat. Of course, since it's Egyptian, of course, he's got to have a cat with him. So you have this kind of science versus magic point, and of course, science trumps magic. And it is just, and that's where it starts to kind of taper off into but to a more normal area, but still strange nonetheless, is that we actually are now, it seems to have kind of skipped over the Eisenhower administration to the point where we have now, we have John F. Kennedy is in office. And, and Groves comes in, with, Oppenheimer and I believe Einstein is there too, and just lays down this huge, thick file on the Soviets. And basically, we see how they're going to try to, basically they're going to turn Kennedy kind of into their puppet. There's all this intel about the Soviets and the awesome power that they wield, and basically Groves is going to secure our projectors I guess this is really the only way that I can call, the only thing that I can call him if they were to call him any kind of team. But our team at Los Alamos, kind of a blank check going forward. And this also kind of helps to kick off the space race. And, you know, even, you know, Groves has some ideas about kind of Kennedy's inaugural speech and how, you know, says, you know, so famously in 1960, you know, we are going, you know, by the end of this decade, we're going to have a man on the moon. And the space race will hopefully, as opposed to the, you know, the arms race, we're going to have a something of, you know, maybe a more peaceful future for everybody. And of course, you know, I mean, this is, you know, it is kind of transcripted from his inaugural speech, and then, but what we have ultimately here is, you know, this finale moment with Feynman and Werner von Braun watching Kennedy giving the speech, and, you know, how Kennedy isn't aware that they are actually in league with the Soviets as far as the space race is concerned, and so on and so forth, and how basically, you know, von Braun just kind of asks, well, what are we going to do now? And Feynman simply answers, whatever we want. And so this is basically creating what I'm relatively certain will be kind of a new jumping on point for readers that want to get into the Manhattan Projects, which I recommend very, very highly, because this has been, from issue 1, it's been a pretty fucking awesome book. I mean, almost every book is like a 5 out of 5, and that is certainly no different here. This is, again, a very solid 5 out of 5 for Manhattan Projects number 9. I mean, Hickman and Butara, I mean, they just do some incredibly brilliant work here with this issue. Just, I mean, with the way that, I mean, Butara has such great attention to detail. I mean, it's very reminiscent of kind of a Frank Quietly, almost a Jeff Darrow at times, with the amount of detail that he puts into everything, and also kind of having this kind of very off-the-wall art style. And, you know, it's just filled. I mean, like every, you know, it's, these pages are just packed with, you know, detail and everything like that. So, I mean, it's just, it's such a terrific way. And it's just, like I said, I mean, I think that what's going to come next, I think, is going to be kind of another, you know, probably the first real natural jumping on point for anybody new to this book to get on board. So I would highly recommend that, you know, if you're not reading this already, pick up the next issue, because that's probably going to be, like I said, it's really good jumping, probably a really good jumping on point. But just, you know, what a great book, what a great read this issue was. Absolute 5 out of 5. So our second book of the week, as far as our independent titles are concerned, is Morning Glories number 24. Basically, we have, you know, this double-sized issue, if you will. Double-sized if it didn't normally run 32 pages, because it's, I think it's 48 pages. So, or 44 pages, something to that effect. But it's okay. It's 1.5 for this book normally. And basically, what we have here is almost kind of a dual narrative father-son tale that's being told here from the point of view, mostly from the point of view of Ike. This is a very Ike-centric issue. Now, again, this feels like it's new information that Ike's father is Abraham, but, and maybe that's just because, you know, so many issues have been so kind of, they go off in strange directions, you know, and the, you know, one thing, you know, ends up kind of tying into this other thing, you know, by, you know, this very strange and long thread that stretches all the way back to issue 1 or issue 2. And, you know, which is one of the things that's so great about this book, is that, you know, you get these little pieces of information that seem to be a surprise, even if you might have already realized that, yes, indeed, Abraham is Ike's father. So like I said, I don't remember that coming before, but for all I know, it might have. I really have to kind of go back through my issues and reread them. But, because, we have gone, with all of, obviously, all of these various different narratives, as far as, these characters are concerned, with the truants, what's going on with Casey, we don't really know. Zoe, well, she's dead. But, at least, Hunter, he's with the truants and Sal also. But, here we have, this opening with, seeing, Abraham seeing his son after he's been born and having to immediately leave. And of course he's with, his driver is Mr. Griggs. And, so, and then we skip right to the present. Well, maybe the present. I don't know if this is the not too long ago past. I don't know if it maybe is taking place longer along than it is. I don't know, but it is the past. Never mind, because it does begin with, this strange spectral form that is approaching Abraham. For what reasons, we don't know. We don't know what the spectral form is. All we know is that Griggs has Abraham and he wants him to pay. And lo and behold, he has just the instrument to make that happen. And then we get, kind of some more flashbacks with Abraham where he's telling Ike how he got his name, that Abraham, that his full first name is Isaac. And then he talks about the story of Abraham and Isaac from the Bible. And, even at age 6, Ike already has a bit of an attitude because, his father is very much absentee. And you get kind of a cats in the cradle, vibe, from, Harry Nilsson, whole kind of vibe from this issue. If Harry Nilsson was kind of a sick, perverted individual like Nick Spencer was. Nick Spencer is, I should say. But, you have, Ike has set fire to something, and apparently it's ruined some of his mother's clothing. Of course, his mother has no tolerance for this child whatsoever. And of course, it's just fucking around behind Abraham's back. But of course, Abraham's never there. And, he's missing, of course, a lot of events in his son's life because he is busy setting up what I think was kind of the beginnings of maybe the Morning Glories Academy, but also is setting up this, this group that will eventually become the Truants. And, so... And, even as he's, as Abraham is telling the story about the biblical Abraham and Isaac, even Ike at that point in time is like, God sounds stupid. It's like, why wouldn't Abraham just kind of tell God, I'm just kind of paraphrasing here, or not even paraphrasing, but just kind of summing up, just why wouldn't Abraham tell God to just, kind of fuck off? Because, there's all of these stories they don't make any sense. It doesn't, make sense for God to say this and then also to say this and still want Abraham to sacrifice his son. So thankfully this isn't, a through line of logic as far as, are we going to see, Abraham and Isaac, is this going to be another situation like that where he's sending, Abraham is kind of sending Ike to his death, or he's going to kill Ike, and then, of course, something is revealed later. I don't think that's what's going on here at all. This is just an anecdote. And then we have Ike kind of being held with Jade, and it does one of those things that I'm, of course, not a big fan of. It's a huge pet peeve of mine as far as from any kind of film, book, TV show, whatever. Anytime that you enter into a room when somebody's telling the punchline of a joke, I've never liked that. It's always annoyed me. It's like, just take the time to tell the fucking joke. even if it's bad, or just don't put a joke in at all, or just say something, whatever. Anyway, so Gribbsy comes in to basically say, you know what? Here's your chance. You're going to get to kill your father again. Because obviously we've known before that, you know, Ike, you know, more than likely killed his father. But for what reasons we do not know. We just, you know, remember the scene of him in like the bus driving by his father's funeral, and, you know, him, you know, being, you know, a total douchebag while that's going on. And you know, of course, you know, Ike being he's kind of the guy that I mean, he's definitely, you know, one of these guys that you love to hate in this book. And, you know, he's talking about the blowjob that Miss Daramount owes him, you know, if he does the deed. But, you know, he was like, well, you know, it's like, I killed my father once already. I mean, to do it twice is just so passe, you know. I've already done it, you know. So it's no longer in, you know, in style for me to do it. And then we get, again, some more, you know, we get some more flashbacks to Ike's youth, of, you know, how, you know, it's like he, you know, going to Coney Island with his father, and, you know, his father kind of leaves him there because he has to, because, you know, someone comes in to kind of interrupt everything. And then, you know, another point when he has to be bailed out of prison, and because he's actually done something, you know, he set fire to one of, you know, his father's own, you know, kind of corporate buildings because they were doing animal testing, and he was trying to set all the poor animals free, because, you know, he's hoping to score PETA chicks, and it's like what the, you know, all the stuff that they're into. And of course, you know, this is part where Abraham's like, look, you know, are you trying to destroy everything that I'm building for you? And, you know, there are some really kind of heartrending moments for both Abraham and Ike. And we can see where Ike, you know, obviously has developed and nurtured this distaste for his father, but never a point of hate. And then, of course, you know, Gribbs, you know, he steps up the pressure, and basically, you know, he's starting to choke out. He grabs Jade and starts to choke her out. You know, basically saying, you know, if you won't, you know, if you're not going to do it for yourself, you know, maybe you'll just do it for her, because, you know, Jade does, you know, they don't want them to know where they were when everybody went poof. So she says that they were making out, and of course, you know, Ike has this great line. It's like, you know, our love, you know, may not, you know, something to the effect of, you know, I know that our love may define reason, but apparently not the laws of physics. You know, something about that. So, you know, then Ike seems very blasé about, you know, this initial threat, but then, you know, turns and says, no, don't hurt her. You know, I will go ahead and I will do it. I will kill my father. And then we get to, again, another flashback where we see Ike, and he's trying to, you know, his father's, you know, kind of drunk, and he's trying to explain everything to Ike, and, you know, in his kind of drunken stupor, and, you know, Ike kind of gently puts him down, and, you know, and says, you know, I don't hate you. But then then we see him reading his father's will, and it says very explicitly, to my son Isaac, I leave you nothing. And that's when the knife comes out. And just when you actually think, when we go back to the present, just when you think Ike has maybe done the heroic and the right thing, there's more to come, because this is Morning Glories. And Morning Glories, if it ever answers one question, if there's ever two small puzzle pieces that it will put together, it will create an even larger one that doesn't seem to fit anywhere until you get these smaller pieces that start to form a greater picture in the puzzle. And that, again, is part of what makes this such an incredibly enjoyable read. I mean, Spencer, you know, he's at the very, very tip top of his game when he writes this title. I mean, he does this book like nobody's business. I mean, no one else could have written this book, and Spencer could not have another book that is so perfect for his style. And of course, Joe Eisma, just, I mean, despite the fact that this is not particularly showy art or anything like that, it's not, you know, it's not on the level of, like, you know, a Greg Capullo or an Andrea Sorrentino or a Marcos Martin or, you know, whatever, you know, Nick Bradshaw or Ryan Stegman, whatever. You know, I mean, the you know, people that are, you know, David Finch, whatever, these sort of fan favorites, even though I don't think that David Finch is particularly that talented of an artist. Anyway, but what Joe Eisma does is so perfect, again, for this book, because he can't, I mean, if there's one thing that he does perfectly, it is facial expressions. It is emotion being conveyed in a raised eyebrow or an open mouth, or it's not like a Greg Land where everybody looks exactly the same. They speak, you know, and you know, it's like women. They when they're angry or when they're laughing, they always have the same look on their face, and that's something that I've always hated about Greg Land, and why I'm glad that I'm not reading any book that he's doing right now. But I mean, it's just, again, this is just, I know that the lack of answers frustrates readers, but, you know, this is the comic book world's Lost. That's really what it is, because you're not going to get, you know, this book isn't going to spoon feed you. It's never going to give you everything that you want. And that, of course, you know, is kind of the something of the problem with Lost, is that once we got to the ending, we didn't get a very satisfying ending. And that is subject to your personal preference. I actually really liked the last episode of Lost, but most people, I think most fans felt cheated by it. But for right now, Morning Glories is absolutely brilliant. This issue, again, absolutely brilliant. 5 out of 5 for Morning Glories, number 24. But the indie book of the week, and close to being the overall book of the week, belongs to FATALE, number 12. Now, here in this next one-off issue, we are transported back to France of 1286 AD, and we are introduced to the character of Matilda. Now, Matilda physically shares some of the same characteristics as Josephine in our modern day, but definitely shares the same abilities, because we see how she has affected the village that she's come to, and why she's being burnt, you know, why she's been tortured, and why she's being burned at the stake for what she's doing. And she is actually gotten to a point where she has been so badly tortured because, you know, men have this insatiable appetite. They're, you know, breaking out into, you know, these mad fights with one another. And, you know, and kind of pestilence is kind of sweeping into this village that she's inhabiting. So naturally, they believe her a witch, and they are prepared to burn her. And after the torture, after the kind of Inquisition, if you will, no one expected the Fatale Inquisition. Anyway, and she welcomes this death because she suffered a great deal, and she believes that she has been the cause of suffering. But death does not come. Even with her being burned alive, death does not happen. There's pain, but death does not come. She is able to free herself of her bonds and finds all of the men around her. Almost all of them have died. She does pick up a sword and kill the last one, and she runs off into the forest. Naked, hairless, covered with burns, and just is looking to escape. And in which she is eventually found by this older man, Ganix, who at first, we may see as a potential threat, but he seems to be very sincere about the way that he wants to care for her. He's an old warrior, and he has seen his share of battles, but he just wants to live. And so does Matilda. She feels that she's in a place, probably for the first time since she woke up some 40-odd years prior, exactly the same age as she is now. Just living simply, just going to, just walking through the forest, sitting by the river, listening to the water, just all of this very calming influence. And Ganix tells her stories and kind of fairy tales, and everything seems to be right with the world. How long is that going to last? I mean, this book, after all, is called Fatale. And she definitely does have some of the power, obviously, that we've seen Josephine wield. And so then some of Ganix's former brothers in arms, with these yellow crosses stitched over their breast, come to assault him and bring him back. And, he tries to fight his way out of it, but he's just too old. And he is brought back to a place where he is certain to die. And, of course, again, Matilda, after Ganix's murder, if you will, reveals herself, just starts putting arrows through people's heads, is causing other men to kill themselves, and she feels free and alive. And, the sense of vitality, and she's happy that these men are dying around her. But of course, the worm turns. And we get something that adds even more mystery to the mystery. Now, I know that in Ghost Critic's review of this, I think that he seemed to have more of a specific idea of how exactly this ended. I feel that this ended on a very non-specific note, that despite what we understand has happened, we don't know for certain what has happened to Matilda. I think it is more open-ended than that. And just Brubaker and Phillips, again, just doing amazing work with this title. And it's just, it's so fascinating the way that they construct the story and that they build it. I mean, these one-shots they've been doing, they're going to be doing another one next issue. And it's going to be kind of an Old West tale. And I cannot fucking wait for that. But just kind of to show... There's a sequence early on in this issue where we do see Matilda, after she has almost been burned at the stake, or has been burned at the stake, but managed to live through it. She is wandering through the forest, and she sees these haunting, nightmarish things in the forest that she knows have always been there. You know, it's almost, you know, it almost makes sense that these things are there around her. That there's some kind of, that she's tied to them inextricably. And again, this helps to not, again, to answer a number of questions, but to, again, enhance the sense of mystery of what exactly this power is, how is it passed down, is it passed down, is Matilda Josephine, how long has she been alive, what spiritual force is she tied to, what evil is it tied to? Because, again, as we saw in the case of the last arc of stories, where we see a man who actually becomes better for what for being around her. We have again, I think that is brought also to effect here with Gannix. I keep wanting to say Gannicus because I'm thinking of Spartacus. But I think, you know, here's a man who I think is partially made a better man because of being around her, not because of any kind of sexual or romantic feelings, but just because he feels maybe the need to protect her. And when this all goes awry, which is when, as we saw again in the previous tale with Josephine again kind of cutting loose and then using her power to escape the clutches of Hansel and the ne'er-do-wells that that she was again to be captured and perhaps sacrificed to whatever. And again, who is this order that Gannix is a member of? What are their ties to Matilda? How does this tie to what's been going on with Josephine currently? Again, the mystery of this book is so fascinating. It is done so incredibly well by Brubaker and Phillips that it helps to actually reach beyond just the kind of the trappings of the noir tale telling that they've been doing so well, and to give it more of an older world flavor to it, and to put to take the book kind of out of its comfort zone and put them into these strange, unusual settings that we wouldn't expect from a book like this, and that works definitely in the book's favor, which is certainly not to say that the book has been bad, because it's been fucking awesome. But this is one of its best issues yet. So this is an absolute 5 out of 5. Sean Phillips's work is, again, it's very, very beautiful and haunting and dark, except in the moments where it is light and bright, and we do have these moments of relaxation, which of course makes the coming violence even have a greater impact. So again, Brubaker again proving he is a master storyteller, and so does Phillips as a visual storyteller. So that's it for tonight. So we've gotten through all of our indie titles, and like I said, tomorrow night we're going to get the big two, and we're going to get, the other books of the week. And like I said, this has been mostly a really good week for comics. Obviously some bad ones, only really one bad one out of the indies, some kind of bad ones out of the majors, more bad ones out of the majors than the minors, if you will. But all in all, I think you'll be very interested to tune in tomorrow night. But hey, again, I'm closing in on 1:30 here, so thanks for watching. I was kind of counting on this one to come in at maybe under an hour or about an hour, but of course here we are. It's an hour and 30 minutes, and I'm not done yet. But now I'm finishing up. So thank you again for watching, and for watching another edition of New Comics, bitches. So of course, if it's your first time here, feel free to subscribe. Don't feel free, just do it. Come on. You don't want to miss more of this. And, you know, thumb it up, thumb it down, let me know what you're thinking, let me know what you're feeling. Comments below, you know, give and take. That's the whole name of the game here, people. That's one of the reasons I like to do this. Other than just, I mean, because I don't talk just to hear myself talk, you know. I talk all day at work. I do sometimes talk, just not just to hear myself talk, or because I like the sound of my voice. It is kind of soothing, though, isn't it? Really, think about it for a while. Ruminate on that. Let it flow over you like the sweetest, sweetest honey. Anyway, I'm gone. I'm Casper. Good night. Again, thank you for watching. This is me, James Donnelly, saying good night from the Shadow Gallery, reminding you, as always, to stay in the shadows.